Sauerkraut, you either love it or you hate it, but you might want to reserve your opinion until you've tried fresh sauerkraut. Sauerkraut in the 18th century could mean life or death to a sailor or a soldier. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking with James Townsend and Son. So sauerkraut's usually not my, favorite thing. It's a little too, what can I say? It's a little too sour, but I like it when it's paired with other things, when it's maybe an ingredient in another dish. And, well, some people probably wouldn't argue with me that sauerkraut is an acquired taste. When the 18th century Scottish physician James Lind performed clinical trials looking for the prevention and the cure of scurvy, he found that acidic foods like citrus and sauerkraut were excellent remedies. Scurvy is a horrible and painful disease that left untreated meant certain death. It's estimated that during the age of sail, more than 2 million sailors died from that disease. That's more than died from injuries, other diseases, and war casualties combined. In addition, General George Washington, in a requisition to Congress in 1777, requested large amounts of sauerkraut. So when Lind published his findings in 1753, it had revolutionary effects on the lives of sailors and soldiers as well. Well, like I said earlier, sauerkraut can be an acquired taste, and it certainly was in the 18th century. The famous explorer Captain Cook had sauerkraut along on his journey, but the sailors weren't very happy with it. So to qualm their complaints, he actually ate the sauerkraut in their presence to encourage their eating of it, and it actually had an immediate effect. Sauerkraut is assumed by many to be primarily a German dish, but many other countries or cultures had it too. The Dutch, the French had their version, the Italians, the Russians, and many more. Some believed it originated in northern climates where early frosts might destroy the cabbage crop, and so farmers needed a way to preserve their cabbages for the long term or over the winter. What turns cabbage into sauerkraut is the fermentation process. There were a few 18th century recipes for sauerkraut that actually suggested the introduction of yeast into the sauerkraut barrel. Most recipes, however, anticipated the spontaneous fermentation going on inside the dish. And now, of course, we know that fermentation is caused by the lactobacillus. They didn't at the time. The same kind of fermentation that you would find in cheeses and in yogurt. So there's really no need to put yeast in your sauerkraut. The basic manufacture of sauerkraut is very simple. There's just two ingredients. You need cabbage and you need salt. I recommend 1 or 2 tablespoons of salt per pound of cabbage. To get started, we need to select quality cabbage. You'll need to remove the outer damaged leaves. Once that you've got those leaves off, you can slice your cabbage in half and then take out the heart. So you need to slice up your cabbage into the slivers. You can either use a nice big knife. That can be difficult. You can use a food processor at home, or you can use a mandolin or slaw cutter. Like this one, we picked this one up very recently at a garage sale. This one's, probably from early 20th century, but remarkably, the design is very similar. Similar ones have been used for hundreds of years. The fermentation process is very simple, and you start out with a container, and you can use, say, like a barrel, like they would have used in the 18th century. They also used crocks, which were very popular. Here's an older ceramic crock. We're going to be using a smaller, just one of our storage jars. We don't make a whole lot. It really depends. The container depends on how much you want to make. You at home, you could even make this in a mason jar. It's very simple. So there is one caveat, however, if you want to use an old crock, an antique crock. Unless it's salt glaze, and even then, if it's salt glaze on the outside, it's likely that it might be lead glaze on the inside, and sauerkraut is acidic, and so that it might draw the lead out of that glaze. So I actually don't suggest using an antique crock for making your sauerkraut. Modern ones would likely have the proper kind of glaze, so that would be all right. We're going to sprinkle a little bit of salt down in the bottom of this. Make sure to use kosher salt or pickling salt, even better. Definitely not iodized salt. Now we can begin to layer in our cabbage, and we're going to put a little bit of cabbage in, but as we put the cabbage in, it needs to be smashed down. Now we can use anything. Here's one of our rolling pins. This is perfect for this job, or if you've got one of our wooden mashers, another product that's great for smashing this cabbage down and getting those juices flowing. I'll make sure to put a link down to all these products down in the description below. As each layer goes in, we're going to smash it down, and then we're going to add a little layer of salt, and then we go ahead and put in another layer of cabbage. Now that we've got our container about 3/4 of the way full, we can stop putting this in. We do want to make sure it's all smashed down nice and tight in our container. And we're actually going to wait a day or two, maybe 3 days, to see where the liquid comes up, because liquid's going to come out of your cabbage, and it depends on your cabbage as to how much is really going to, and how much you mash it down, how much liquid's going to come out of that. You may have sufficient liquid in your cabbage to get water all the way up over the top of your shredded cabbage. If you need to add more liquid at the 3-day mark, if you don't have a solution over the top of your shredded cabbage, you'll need to add a brine solution. So the brine solution should be something about a teaspoon of salt in a cup of water. You want to dissolve that salt, then you can add that solution in on top of your shredded cabbage to make sure that it's always underneath the liquid. Also, at this point, your cabbage needs to be weighed down. So you need to have a rock, a board with a rock on top of it. If you're worried about your rock contaminating your water, you can put it inside of a plastic bag, even a plastic bag full of water. But you want something on top of this cabbage weighing it down so that it stays underneath the water and doesn't float to the top. Once you've covered your cabbage and you've got the weight on top of it, all you need to do is put the lid on and let it sit. As we're letting this ferment, we need to make sure to wait the proper amount of time. Bare minimum, this is going to take 2 to 3 weeks. It really depends on the temperature and some other factors. 6 weeks is more normal, or even longer. A couple of months, no problem. It's only going to get better. And while it's fermenting, you'll need to check on it every once in a while to make sure that the liquid level hasn't fallen down below the level of the top of your sauerkraut. So make sure the sauerkraut is always covered with water. If you ever find mold growing on the top of your sauerkraut, you know what all you really need to do is scrape that moldy part off. Make sure you get it all, resubmerge your sauerkraut, and let it keep percolating. It will be fine. Sauerkraut was a preferred sailor and soldier food because no one had to worry about it spoiling. I mean, it's already spoiled, right? That's what makes it good. Now we're going to let this ferment, but say you really love sauerkraut and you can't wait for this to ferment 6 weeks or whatever. You really want it right away. Well, in an upcoming episode, we're going to be doing another style of sauerkraut that one naval officer of the time period called Tuscan-style sauerkraut, and that one is pickled with vinegar. Make sure to stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we try out this sauerkraut, where we make some other sauerkraut and other preservation techniques.